in shirts, not like this. I went old school and wore an old shirt, thinking I was going to be, you know, cool. And then I realized everybody else is wearing this year's shirt. So, you know, I thought I would be retro, but it didn't work out so great. Oh, Commodore Gary Romer is here, as also for this year's Harvest Moon. We have Fleet Captain Dwayne Guidry as well. And I think, is Dwight here? He's hard to miss usually, but either sitting very low or not. But anyway, welcome to Harvest Moon. So most of the speakers you will hear today are from Lakewood, subject matter experts on the subject. So, and again, they're taking their time to help put on this race. Like most races that we have in regattas, you know, it is a volunteer event. So it's for people who love the sport. And lest we forget, it's the 35th annual Bacardi Havana Nights. It is a rum race after all. So we want to have fun, but we want to have a great party, and we're looking forward this year to having an excellent Cuban band. Of course, Bacardi's going to be there. Rumors that the Bacardi girls are going to be there too. Some of you may find that. Anyway, it's going to be a great event, and we're looking forward to it. So, without further ado, our first speaker is David Como, this year's PRO. David is a native of Texas and lived here all his adult life. Well, except for the few years he spent down in St. Thomas for, was it 6 years or something like that? Yeah, we're all jealous of that. He's been sailing for over 30 years, mostly on his own boat here in Galveston Bay and the U.S. Virgin Islands. He's a member of the Lakewood Board of Directors for 5 years now, and has been PRO for many of the Lakewood sponsored events and youth events, and participated in the race committees. He's been involved as Harvest Moon for over 10 years and is his 3rd year as PRO. I personally am very appreciative for him agreeing to do it this year as my 1st year as chairman, and he's made my job so much easier. So, without further, David.
What did you just do? I think that whatever you were just on is just going to work.
It's a real good thing he's got 30 years sailing experience. He has 3 minutes computer experience.
Yes. That's the first 3-hour show.
All right, so let me start out with a couple of announcements that may not have to do with anybody who's in the room, but for people who are out of town or who otherwise cannot possibly be here, we are trying to live stream this on Facebook Live. We are also recording today so that if people need to go out, for example, because you're racing on the bay in a couple of hours, you can watch the rest later. Get with me if you need that information. The trying to stream it on Facebook Live, if you've got crew members who are, for example, I talked to somebody earlier who's got a crew member in South Carolina who's trying to watch it on Facebook Live. It is Lakewood Yacht Club Harvest Moon Regatta has a page on Facebook. Go there, and it's being live streamed there. There may be technical issues. You're going to get a much better presentation if you're here live, except for the feedback. We only have one mic up here. How do we have feedback? Yeah. Okay. Don't know what that was. Okay. Got it. Okay. So that was number one. Can you all hear me?
If you don't speak in the mic, you won't record.
So I have a choice of going live stream or recording.
No, because they're getting it from the sound in the room. So
Okay.
if we can hear you, the camera's gonna hear you.
Okay. So let me start with our website right here. This is harvestmoonregatta.com. We should have all of the information that you need to know that I'm going to tell you can be found on this site somewhere. The notice of race is posted here. The safety equipment requirements are posted here. There's a frequently asked questions page that will be updated from time to time when I get too many people asking me the same question. So those things will be posted. This is the place to go for all of that information. When the sailing instructions are posted, they will be available here. So first thing is to know that we've got that is your number one place for all information, including your race documents. These are the important dates. These are all in the notice of race. No need to write this down because you've got access to the notice of race, so they are there. I do want to talk about rating certificates. This is a race, and so there isn't a one design fleet that I'm aware of that is going offshore, unless the 105s all want to get together and sail as one design. So we need to have rating certificates. Jim Marzoni is helping me with that. He's a deputy PRO this year. And if you already have your 2022 certificate and you've already put it in the system, you're good to go. If you're not, you need to get on that right away because PERF-GB is a volunteer organization also, and they've got limited resources, so they need to work on that. And if you're with ORC, work with John Barnett. He can get in touch with the right folks. Registration, everybody who's here is probably already registered. If not, there will be a late fee for registering. I encourage you to do so sooner rather than later. The thing to remember there is, number one, when you registered, you received a link. If you need to update your registration for any reason, follow that link to do so, including, for example, one of your crew isn't going to be here after all, or you've got a new crew. Make sure that your crew is updated on that website. I think that's all I've got on the rating certificate and registration. So for those of you who haven't done Harvest Moon Regatta before, is there anybody in here who hasn't done Harvest Moon Regatta before? That's great. That's surprising because of our numbers. I'm surprised. That's fantastic. It is an offshore race. Hopefully, it's not too far offshore. It's within, 15, 20 miles at most of the coast along the way down. But it's far enough out that bad stuff can happen. And it's the Coast Guard can't get to you immediately. Towboat US, if you're at Clear Creek Channel, they may take 2 hours to get to you. So if you're offshore, it may take a little while, and you got to be prepared for that, which means you need to be self-sufficient. You need to be prepared for everything, and that means doing advanced preparation before you go out there. If you've got tons of offshore experience in the Northeast, if you've got tons of offshore experience in the Caribbean, there are still some things around here that are going to be different than they are in those places. It shoals up in a lot of places close to shore. Shouldn't have to during the race, if you're on the right race course, but it does shoal up. And there are a lot of standing fixtures out there that aren't lit. You need to keep a good watch with somebody who hasn't been looking at their iPhone recently so they don't have night vision. So you need to have a standing watch. There will be more on that later, but those things are different than they usually are. But the thing to keep in mind here is ultimately, as the skipper is responsible for his or her vessel. It is your responsibility to make sure your folks are safe. Obviously, you want to sail fast, but most importantly, that you're safe. The skipper's meeting is not, by rule, a requirement. I've had some people say, I can't make it to the skipper's meeting, but I highly encourage you to attend for a number of reasons. First of all, there's information that you will receive there that we won't have available to us beforehand. Secondly, the yellow brick will be passed out at that time. John will be up here later to tell you more about our tracking system. But if you cannot either be here yourself or send a responsible crew member to be here for the skipper's meeting, then you'll need to make arrangements for how to pick up that yellow brick. And in the few days between skipper's meeting and the start, that's not always easy to do. And of course, if you've purchased merchandise online between now and then, that's an opportunity to pick it up. The other thing to remember, before skipper's meeting starts, make sure that every one of your crew, number one, is listed on your registration, and number two, has filled out a crew waiver. If it hasn't been done before the meeting, then you are not actually registered. Is that a hand I see trying to go up back there? No, okay, just hold the hand up. So again, if you cannot make it as a skipper to that meeting, send a trusted, responsible crew to get all these things done for you. Sailing instructions. The sailing instructions will be posted a few days before the skipper's meeting. I cannot emphasize this enough. Please read the sailing instructions. We do change them from year to year. There's one change this year that I hope will make things easier on both sailors and the race committee. But we do change them every year, and even if we hadn't changed anything, if you can remember last year's sailing instructions by heart, my hat's off to you. So read them and keep them handy and ask the rest of your crew to read them. Read them again. Come prepared with any questions you have about them, because I try to write them clearly, but they're not always perfectly clear, to the skipper's meeting. I'll be there at the skipper's meeting, and we'll have an opportunity to go over them. I'd also keep them on the boat and read them on the way down to the starting area. We'll get to that in a little minute. If anybody does have questions, by the way, during this presentation, just let me know. I'm happy to do what I can to answer. Safety inspections. After the skipper's meeting, we will select a number of boats at random. I run a randomizer program, so however effective the Excel randomizer is, that's how random it is. But we'll randomly select a number of boats to do a pre-race inspection. It's possible we may actually want to go out and look at your boat and inspect the things that are required on your boat. It's more likely that I will send to you from my address or from the Harvest Moon website address. Your boat's been selected. Please send us a photograph of the following things and upload them onto a Dropbox account that we'll have set up. That's the way that we're going to do it. The most important thing is be real aware during the day after the skipper's meeting. Look at your email box, look at your spam filter, make sure it doesn't get caught in one of those things. The other thing is we may do an inspection after you arrive in Port Aransas. Again, something that we intend to do on a random basis. Although if we've had a particular issue with a particular vessel, we may inspect you because we weren't able to reach you on the radio, for example. Let's make sure that you actually have the working radios that you're supposed to have. That might be something that we would do. So those are opportunities to do that. I also see a couple people taking pictures of this. You don't need to do that. We will post this on the website. So save yourself some squinting, and we'll have them available on the website after today's meeting. Interfering with commercial traffic. This is probably one of the two biggest hazards to our ability to run the race every year. Interfering with commercial traffic does not mean you got in an accident. Does not mean you almost got in an accident. It means the pilot of the vessel thought that you might have almost got into an accident. Okay, because they're the ones blowing 5 blasts when they're getting really nervous. And so you gotta avoid those 5 blasts. If we get a report that is not from one of the competitors that says you interfered with commercial traffic, that's going to come from the Coast Guard, it may come from the pilots, it may come from someone else. You are subject to being disqualified forever. Please don't do it. And that's, by the way, not just in the Houston Ship Channel. It's anywhere offshore that you see commercial traffic. And it's also in the Port A channel as you're coming back in to wherever you're going to be docking. And that place is particularly narrow, and there are turning lanes and turning places. Don't play chicken with a big boat, especially after you've finished racing. Give them leeway, let them go by, then go behind them. So this is, I cannot emphasize that enough. Communications is another issue. The safety requirements require that we all have VHF radios, and that's great. And I'm sure everybody in this room does have VHF radios. But does everybody use them? Does everybody have them turned on at a volume that they can hear if they are hailed on the radio? If they are speaking on the radio, can the other party hear them? Or are they using a handheld in the cockpit while they're sailing that is mostly wind that you're going to hear from that position? So try to use your masthead radio as much as possible. Keep the volume up. Always monitor 16. Always monitor the race channel. And when you're near one of the ship channels, use the ship channel designation, the VHF channel that's designated for that ship channel. Another thing, and this is basically learning from past practice, land support. A lot of us have spouses, families who enjoy watching the race. They enjoy following on yellow brick. They may follow the race on the way down there. But sometimes, and yellow bricks have been much better than the spots were in the past, but sometimes those devices don't work perfectly. And if your yellow brick isn't working perfectly, your spouse might wonder what's going on. Unless they have actual reason to believe that you are actually in distress, they shouldn't be calling the Coast Guard directly asking for assistance. If they have a question, they can call us. We can tell them what we know, what we don't know. But please, try to manage the situation. Everybody's got EPIRBs. That's one of the either EPIRBs or PLBs. Just be careful that they're not in your bilge, and that water comes in, and all of a sudden you've set off your EPIRB and you don't even know it, and the Coast Guard's out there looking for you. If your EPIRB does go off, the Coast Guard will call you on the radio. If you are monitoring the radio appropriately, then you can very easily say, "Oops, sorry, false alarm," and it's no problem. But if you're not listening to the radio, the next thing you know, you've got a helicopter circling over your head. So that's one of the reasons it's important to listen to your radio. Race tracking, I won't spend too much time on this because John is going to be talking about this in a little bit. But there are two functions. One, so we know where you are, and two, it is going to be the device that we are going to use to record your finish time. We'll go into this a little bit later, but that's probably the most important thing. When you get it, follow the instructions that he provides you. Make sure it's working. If you have an issue, get with him on how to resolve those issues. That's true both at skipper's meeting to read the instructions, make sure you understand them, and also at check-in. He will be checking to make sure that your yellow brick is tracking properly, and he may be trying to hail you. Going back to the VHF, make sure you're on the proper VHF channel in case he's trying to reach you that way. Speaking of check-in, the first process that we do is we want to make sure that everybody is out there, that we're keeping track of people who are going to be racing. And that takes place well before the start line. It takes place near the Houston Ship Channel, near marker 11. There will be a bunch of folks on shore talking to everybody on radio. So I believe we start at 10 o'clock. When you get close to marker 11, go ahead and call. They'll ask for the number of people on board. Wait for them to confirm, we have you, we've got you checked in, before you switch over to the channel that will be used in the start area. These channels, these VHF channels, will be listed in your sailing instructions. Another good reason to read your sailing instructions, and have them on your way down to the check-in area so that you can read this process before you engage it. The start of the race. So and weather permitting, we will start at Pleasure Pier. We have, usually there's a flag, which you won't be able to see the flag, but we'll also have a big orange stripe of some sort at Pleasure Pier that is the starboard or right side of the starting line. And then we'll have an inflatable mark that is well out there, that is the port side of the starting line. It is a large starting line. There's plenty of room to start. It is much better for you to get a good clear start than it is to get exactly on the pin if you think the pin in is favored. And if you think that the starboard end is favored and you want to get right next to that, just remember that thing's made of concrete and steel, and if you're off by just a little bit, it may not end well. The starting sequence is the way it is in the racing rules of sailing. We will try on the radio to give you a countdown. Again, if your radio is working and you're listening, that should help you with the race area. I will point out, there are 15 minutes from one start to the next start. So if you are not in the group that is starting right now, please put yourself well clear. I mean, at least 10 boat lengths clear of the starting area, so that the people who are in starting sequence, they can do the maneuvers that they want to without interference from folks who are not in the starting area. So there's plenty of time. There should be plenty of room. This is a diagram of what it generally looks like. I realize we've got the Bruce station. We're not at the Bruce station. We're very close to the Bruce station. But hopefully we will be at the end of the pier this year. I will tell you last year, because this could happen again, we had to... This end of the pier was under construction, so we were up closer to one of the roller coasters that's up there on Pleasure Pier. I still think that the racers were able to see us. We didn't have, we only have one over early that I'm aware of, so it was okay. But be aware it may not be right on the end of Pleasure Pier that the starting area is on. By the way, if weather doesn't permit this start, or if conditions do not permit this start, the alternate starting area is on the beach in Galveston. That will be something that would be listed in the sailing instructions if we believe that that is likely to happen. In that case, the race length will be extended by a little bit. Okay. Don't do this. It's a big enough race area. You don't need to do this. All right, so radio communications at the start, we will count down, as I said to you. We'll also try to let folks know if they are over early on the line. Hopefully you will know whether you are over early. And we've got two options that we include in the sailing instructions. If you're a little over, that is, your entire boat is not over the starting line, then instead of going back and crossing, you can do a 2 turns penalty. Now, if you do that, and we will tell you on the radio, boat number 1, 2, 3, you're over early, exoneration is available. Now, if we tell you that and you do the 2 turns, we have to see you doing the 2 turns. And there's a lot of boats out there, so we may not be able to see you. So take a look at the other boats that are around you. If we tell you we didn't see you do 2 turns, you give us 2 boat names and you talk to those crew and they saw you do the 2 turns, problem solved. If you don't do the 2 turns, or if you don't have exoneration available because you're more than a full boat length beyond the starting line, then we will just add an hour to your corrected time. That's a lot of time in this race, so it's going to be a pretty significant penalty. So again, it's a long race. If you're a boat length late to the starting line, you're usually in a better position than if you're a boat length over early. Pretty significant better position. One other thing, sometimes people have trouble getting down to the race on time. They're running behind. They still want to run the race. We are going to run the races in the order that we've got them to the extent that we can. But if you are, for example, an hour behind your starting time, you're in the cruising classic canvas non-spin, you started at 2 o'clock and it's 3 o'clock and you're coming through. give us a call on the radio. Tell us, hey, we are in this division. I know that our group started an hour ago. We're crossing the start line right now. Even if other people are starting, it's okay to do that. But let us know, because that will help us eyeball you and know that, you know, the fact that you're starting 30 seconds before everybody else, you're really just an hour behind a different fleet. You're not 30 seconds ahead of this fleet. So give us a call on the radio and let us know that. Other than that type of communication, we're generally only going to be counting down on the radio. Don't call us with a question about the sailing instructions. Don't call us about which side of this mark should I be on. Don't call us about those things while we're in starting sequence, because we're focused on getting the races started. Generally speaking, if you ask me a question on the radio that the answer to which is in the sailing instructions or the notice of race or the racing rules of sailing, I'm either not going to answer you, or I might say, please read your sailing instructions. So only call if, you know, certainly call if there's an emergency, certainly call if you've got a problem or something like that, but shouldn't be calling on the radio with questions about rules and things like that. Okay, I think I've got everything there. We've talked about exoneration and whether it is available and not available. And these, again, these are taking out of last year's sailings instructions. They will likely be exactly the same this year. There might be some word changes, but these are from the sailing instructions that you'll get shortly before the skipper's meeting. Okay, sailing the course. We'll show you a map in a little while, but the basic gist of the course is you start at Pleasure Pier, and there are two big marks and then the starting line. You keep those two big marks to starboard. The Freeport light, the Matagorda light, you've got to keep those to starboard, so that prevents you from getting too close inshore that you're likely to run aground. So those are your basic marks. You can go as far out, east offshore as you want. Some people do that, even though it's a longer course. Some people believe that either the currents or the winds are better out there, and so it makes for a faster race. That's skipper's choice. If one of those lights is missing, use the GPS coordinates. Make sure you keep them to starboard. Often it's not going to, you don't need to make that a real close call. This is the basic race that was described in the previous slide. Withdrawing from the race. And by the way, this is true the day of the race, even before the start. It is true if something comes up after you've checked in, but before the start, and it's true from the start until the finish. If you ever withdraw from the race, it's very important that we hear from you and we know that you have withdrawn from the race, because we're in Port Aransas keeping track of all the boats that started, all the boats that checked in, and where are they down here, and when can we expect them down here. Yellow Brick can help us, but again, if it's not working, we're looking for you. So if you're withdrawing from the race, even if you're coming to Port A, let us know. There are various means to let us know. If you're off of Matagorda, your radio signal is probably not going to get to us in Port Aransas. But if you're someplace where you have a cell signal, even if it's a cell signal that's only good enough to text us, please do so. The numbers are in the sailing instructions. If all of that fails and you cannot get notification to us in a way that we are responding to, then call the main line at Lakewood Yacht Club, which is listed here and will also be listed in your sailing instructions. But we need to know that you've withdrawn. If you're coming back to Port Aransas, great. If you're coming to Port Aransas, you're going to duck into the ICW and you're going to come down to Port Aransas, let us know that, so that we know that you're in the ICW. I know a few years ago, we had somebody who did that and then ran aground on their way down in the ICW. But we knew where they were, and so we were able to, we had enough information to make sure that they were safe in a situation where the weather was really pretty perilous that night. So make sure you let us know by any means available what your plans are and where you're going. If you're coming back up here, if you abandon or you withdraw and you're coming back up here, let us know that as well. We may follow up and ask you to contact us after you've also made wherever it is that you're going to berth safely. Finish area. It is a virtual finish. For those of you who've done the race in prior years, but not the last 2 years, you know that we used to finish inside the Port Aransas Channel, which made for some challenges depending on weather circumstances and tidal flows and things like that. But commercial traffic coming out of Port Aransas didn't really happen that frequently, and it wasn't really that much of an issue. That has changed. I don't know if y'all know this, but they've built LNG terminals down there, and there are big LNG ships that come out through this channel, and it's just not safe to try to sail under up this channel, particularly if you're trying to do so within a certain time to get your finish time for race purposes. So that's basically off limits as a finish area. So what we've done is we put it together a virtual finish area and finish line. Those 2 points they will be in your sailing instructions. And I think the biggest issue that I'd encourage you to do here is have them in your GPS and your chart plotter well ahead of time, but don't try to cut the corner. If you try to cut the corner, it's possible that your yellow brick may not say you finished. If your yellow brick doesn't think that you crossed the finish line, particularly if you're close to one of the edges, it will give the time before you got there, 5 or 10 minutes afterwards, but it will not give your finish time if you don't cross between those 2 points. So don't cut it close. Give yourself a good 100 yards inside of either of those points to make sure that you are actually crossing the finish line. After you've crossed the finish line, you've got plenty of room and plenty of time to make your decision as to whether you want to down sails, engage your engine out before you go up the channel, and then motor up the channel, which ideally is the best way to do it. If it would be a reach, for example, to sail up the channel and you want to do that, you're on your own. If you think you can do that safely, I would still engage your engine before you go up the channel, just so that you know it's on, you know it's working, and you've got time to get those things addressed before heading up. But you've got time, but do clear that finish area so that boats that are behind you have plenty of room to do the same thing. Don't finish and then just stop there. Please come down by a couple of 100 yards before you do all that. Do also keep a sharp eye for commercial traffic, particularly if you're finishing at night. It's not that easy to see, but look for lights that are moving, outbound or inbound for that matter. And I would, if there's a vessel coming out or a vessel going in, I would wait until they're completely out or completely in before you went up there. Finish procedure. This is going to be slightly different than it was in previous years. Those yellow bricks work very well. They tell us to the second the time that you cross the finish line. Again, assuming that you cross the finish line. We are going to use that data to score you, as long as it works. And yellow brick has been working very well, but we cannot promise, it is technology, so we cannot promise it will work 100% of the time. So we do want you to take the picture that we've asked you to take for the last couple of years. That is, take a picture of your chart plotter showing your GPS position that will indicate that you have finished, and showing the time to the second in local time. That's Central Time, United States. Take that picture and hold on to it. We will ask you for it if we feel like we need it. We might need it if the yellow brick doesn't work right. We might need it if we do think the yellow brick worked right, but one of your competitors doesn't believe it. They might ask for some additional evidence. So it's possible that we'll need it, but we're not going to ask for it unless we need it. So take that picture, hold on to it. If we do need that information and we don't have it, we'll go off the best available information that we have. Okay, after finishing, you've got to dock. Now, for those of you who are going into the city marina in Port Aransas, which will be most of you, There is a different channel from the race channel that is for the docking committee. That will be listed in the sailing instructions. Go ahead and tune to that channel. I would call them once you're approaching City Marina. I wouldn't approach them when you're just when you're inside the jetty. I'd wait until you're probably 5 or 10 minutes from getting inside the jetties. Call the docking committee. They will tell you what to do from there. It may be go up on a raft, it may be go to a certain slip. If you are going to another location, we need to know where that is. If you're going to Island Moorings, if you're going to go down to Corpus Christi, if you're going to go to Rockport, we need to know where that is, in part because we may need to inspect your vessel. That information can be provided in the safety information sheet or the check-in in Port Aransas sheet that you'll fill in after you get there. But you don't need to call anybody, at least with the race committee, on the radio for doing that. I got all the notes that I wanted to talk to. Gotcha. Okay, and then the last thing here is to plan your return trip now. Make sure you know how you're going to get the boat back home. If you're going to come back through the ICW, be aware of bridges and locks. There are some links here that you can use to check on them, but also make sure you've got the phone numbers for them and that you can raise them on the radio if you need to. Be aware of that information. If you're going to go offshore, make sure you've got the crew to go offshore. If you want to use the yellow brick on the way back home so people can watch you on your return trip, you're welcome to do that. You can purchase, there's an additional fee for that. You can purchase it online. John may speak to that a little bit later as well. If people are going to Corpus Christi, and I don't know how in-depth this is going to be covered later, but I've been told that, that there has been some dredging in the channel and spoils being placed in places that are not charted in Corpus Christi Bay. So be aware of that if you're going to transit down to Corpus Christi after the race in Port Aransas. I do want, I know that I believe Philip is here. I saw him right here up here in front. Philip Croft, if anybody doesn't get his monthly recreational boater information guide, I think I've got that acronym right, updates, they're very informative, very helpful. It saves you time from reading all the notices to mariners and things like that. I'm still saying you should probably go out and read those items, but he tells you the things you really need to know about. So I highly recommend that you look for those. And that is all I have for this morning. I did not use all of my time. Does anybody have questions?
Where does Philip publish his stuff? Just mentioned.
Where does Philip publish his stuff? He mentioned he's got a Facebook page.
On Facebook, it's on Facebook.
So I'd look on Facebook. I'd search for Recreational Boater Information Guide. Okay. Jay.
David, on the handouts on the last page, it's got the address for the Facebook site. So you can see it there on the handout.
Okay, so when you checked in, and this is something I probably also should have mentioned, if you came in without actually initialing your attendance on the check-in sheet, please do that during one of the breaks today. And there is a handout out there. And if you didn't hear Jay, the website for Philip's site is listed on the last page of that handout. All right. Well, I think the Coast Guard is up next, and I see you in the back of the room. So thank you very much, everybody.